Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the Empowered Nutrition Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Erin. I'm excited to be here.
So thrilled to have you. I have about a million questions for you, but I know I only get an hour, so I'll try to hold back. But I can't wait to talk about this topic.
Me too. Tell me.
Yeah. So your story is very interesting. It sounds like you. I want to learn more about exactly what it is, but you help people who have digestive problems, which so do I, but we do very different things.
Yes.
So I'm fascinated, and there's so many different like realms of your work that you could be doing. So tell me how you got into this specifically. How is it digestive health that is your specialty, and then the specialized like work that you do within that?
Yeah. So you're right. I do about 95% of my clients, I suppose, have gut disorders of some sort.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's the niche field, that I work in.
Yeah.
And it came about because a long, long time ago, when I had some digestive problems myself, and I got quite unwell. I got pretty
Yeah.
seriously unwell, and it was just by chance, actually, that I was referred to a particular dietetic practice in
Mm,
Australia, and
okay.
they're actually the part of Monash University that
I was
developed the
gonna say, was it Low FODMAP? Was it Monash? And it was.
That's right. Yeah, it was way back before they had developed the low FODMAP diet,
Wow.
but they were just testing around fructose malabsorption. And so I went and consulted with them, and so the gastroenterologist referred me to them. He said, "I think you've got this fructose malabsorption. It's a new thing, and you should go and chat to this practice down in Melbourne." And so I had a chat to them, and I remember talking to the dietitian and saying, "I'm just so sick, but I am really stressed. I'm so anxious. My health is just so bad, and my whole body." I'd lost a lot of weight. I'd lost 13 kilos, in 9 months, and I was quite
Oh,
skeletal, and so I was struggling in many ways with being so unwell. And what had happened was I ended up in the emergency room because I had my heart was being affected by, as it turns out, very low potassium. And so
wow.
that's how it all kind of came about. Um, and that's when, they referred me to the gastroenterologist, and off we went and did those things. So yeah, I arrived at this kind of with this dietitian, and I was telling her about how stressed I was, and the anxiety, from feeling so unwell and not knowing what it was and not being able to fix it, and my health just plummeting. And she had this pamphlet she held up to me, and she said, "I don't really know anything about it, but I've got this pamphlet from the Australian Hypnotherapists Association that says that hypnotherapy is good for IBS." And I said, "Just send it my way. I will
Right.
do anything, anything.
Anything.
I
Yeah.
don't care if we don't understand it. I will try anything." And I went off. I actually, I traveled to see this particular hypnotherapist, and I went off there. And I remember the very first appointment when she did some relaxation with me, that immediately my body relaxed, and immediately I started to feel better. And I was so struck by how quickly that could happen. And I was also acutely aware that there was no magic in that it was just by relaxation. And I thought, my God, the power that my mind has on my body is really
Yeah.
profound, really profound. And so, I was already working in mental health back then, and anyway, off I went and did some studies, some more studies, and that's when I decided I was going to develop this, gut focused therapy, and that's what I did because I couldn't find it anywhere. Nobody was doing it,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, it's definitely helped me, and so I want to help other people. I don't want other people to be experiencing these same difficulties.
It's a
And
nightmare.
that was now, that'll be, almost 14 years ago now, long time. Yeah, yeah. So now I just see people, who come from clinics like yours, who are kind of seeking treatment and protocols for different gut symptoms that they have, or it might be from gastroenterologists,
Yeah.
functional doctors, where there is an acknowledgement that stress, heightened
Yeah.
anxiety, trauma, those aspects are a large contributing factor to
Mhm.
symptoms. And it can just be, that you don't have to have trauma in your life. It can be that the symptoms themselves created, so much disturbance in your life that now they're, causing you stress or anxiety. And then you end up in this terrible feedback loop where
Mhm.
now you're stressed and anxious about the symptoms. So that creates more symptoms. And then you're just stressed and anxious about that again.
Absolutely. Like if you can't trust that you can make it through a meeting without like pooping your pants.
Exactly.
If you weren't
Yeah.
stressed before, now you sure are.
You're very stressed. Yes. If you didn't have diarrhea by now, you definitely will have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think this is such an interesting thing because um so I'm from the like you suggested, like I'm from the very classic kind of it's not even classic. The classic thing when I started this work, gosh, maybe 9 years ago,
Yeah.
was people with IBS would be told like this is in your head. They would be offered like
Mhm.
mental health related medications, like or anti-anxiety medications. So like that was sort of like the toxic like backstory that I kind of came into this in, and then it was like I'm in this camp of sort of no, actually, there's a physical problem that's happening in the gut. So we're looking
Yes.
at like dysbiosis and infections and like
Yes.
the incorrect location of bacteria. So SIBO, like which I saw you work with, and like all these things, which are very real. But I think it's funny how the pendulum swings because through the years of doing this work, what I've come to realize is that yes, these gut health imbalances are very real and they're very much causing symptoms. However,
Yes. Mm.
you
Mhm.
can have two people that have the same maybe result on their SIBO breath test, and one person feels fine and the
Yeah.
other person can't even get through their work day. And often
Yes.
that is related to imbalances in the nervous system and like maybe their brain chemistry. I don't fully understand it, but I am so on board with what you do because I find
Mm.
that there is a neurologic component to this that's highly
Mm.
related to maybe some anxiety. And then like I love how you brought up trauma because I feel like that has been like a huge pattern of seeing that like past traumas tend to
Right.
be something that predisposes to this, where it's like, look, everybody has some dysbiosis. Why is it that 20% of people have IBS and not 100%? I think what
Yes.
you're talking about is a huge part of that.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And it comes back to the nervous system. That's what it is.
Mhm.
So whether the original cause was some dysbiosis, like you said, or if it was from trauma or stress or anxiety, um, that all of those still affect the nervous system. And then especially in my work, I mean, there's head down anxiety, that comes from thinking, comes from the mind. And then there's bottom up anxiety. So that's affected, anxieties created by, physiological imbalances that are happening in the body. I often describe to women, that one of the things that we know well about that is around the hormones.
Yeah.
That is just, you can have a person who doesn't have anxiety, but if their hormones are out of balance and they end up with this big swing in their hormones, it can turn you into some other version of yourself that you don't normally experience. And no amount of thinking, sitting down and meditating, if someone has really bad PMS and the anxiety is just out of control,
Yeah.
no amount of thinking differently or sitting down and doing meditation helps that because it's come from the body up.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm,
Tell me
yeah.
more about yeah, like that's such an interesting point of like this can be bidirectional because I think the other kind of like almost myth around all this is that people only think about the top down. They're like, okay,
Yes.
so somebody's anxious, it gives them digestive problems. But
Yes.
I think even that could be better fleshed out. But tell me about the other direction.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, because that is the crux of my work, really, is around how people's thoughts and emotions and behaviors, their histories, in their life, how they're living their life, the alignment or misalignments, the relationships that they're in, all of those circumstances are then affecting their physical body.
Hmm.
Um, and it's basic, in the sense that if you have um, stress is an overarching theme. So if we think of it, stress as an umbrella, and underneath you might have trauma, anxiety, fear, all kinds of things underneath. But we just kind of give it an umbrella term of stress,
Hmm.
because stress is the physiological response that happens in the body.
Hmm.
And so stress is when there is a stress response that's been activated in the nervous system.
Hmm.
So, we ideally want to sit in our parasympathetic rest and digest state, so we're nice and relaxed. But of course, modern life doesn't provide the greatest opportunities for that. We have to really carve that out.
Yeah.
And so we spend the majority of our time over in the sympathetic stress response, which means that our nervous system is activated as if there is some kind of threat. And so that, of course, has an effect. Very briefly, biologically, our gut is designed to be affected by stress. It's meant to happen. When we are in a life or death circumstance, the body arranges itself to save our life. And so in that arrangement, it starts reprioritizing the functions of the body. And so it says, well, right now, digesting yesterday's lunch is not important.
Hmm.
What is important is that I save your life, which means I need all the blood flow that I can get up to the heart so that
Hmm.
I can pump that around the body to allow you to fight or flight.
Right.
Um, and so because that's the priority, it says, well, because I need all that blood flow, I'm going to take blood flow from parts of the body that don't need it. And I'm also going to deprioritize and stop functions of the body that don't need to be working right now. And a
Hmm.
really large organ in the body that uses a lot of blood flow is the digestive tract. It's huge.
Hmm.
And of course, it does the migrating motor complex about every 90 minutes. So it's a downward wave of contraction through the digestive tract about every 90 minutes. And so that uses blood flow for that to happen.
Hmm.
So when your life is under threat, real threat, we're talking about this is extreme circumstance. If you were actually under a life-threatening event,
Yeah.
then your body's going to go, well, my only job right now is to save your life. Everything else doesn't matter. So I can't afford for the migrating motor complex to come on board right now while I'm trying to save your life. And
Right.
B, I also need all that blood flow. So I'm going to do one of two things to your digestive tract. I'm either going to empty the contents as fast as I can and give you symptoms like cramping, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, or I'm just going to paralyze the digestive tract temporarily and give symptoms of constipation. So
Hmm.
it's quite clever that the body does that. And so that's really the first point to understand,
Yeah.
is to really let land and to honor, which is, okay, wow, my body still knows how to save my life. My
Yeah.
body can still put that into practice when it needs to. But the problem is we no longer live in tribes, where there's wild lions, putting our life at risk. We live in the modern world. And so the things that we perceive as threatening are different now.
Hmm.
And we live lives that are high in stress generally, that are misaligned, that we're trying to keep up with everything. And so what happens is that's stress. And so we perceive that as stress.
Hmm.
And therefore our nervous system does. It goes, I'm on. It's my job. It's my job.
Right.
And so
It's like the
instead of
tiger never stops chasing you. You're just constantly in
yeah,
that mode.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. And it doesn't have to be at 100% and then it drops back down like it should do. Our body can cope with that. You know, we coast along here, our stress levels peak up like this. When there's a lion, we get away with it, it's fine, and then they drop straight back down.
Hmm.
That's how our body's meant to function,
Yeah.
and our body can physiologically cope with those irregular peaks of stress.
Hmm.
But now we don't do that. Our stress levels aren't down here; they're up here, and
Right.
our ceiling is here. You know, so we don't have far to go before we hit that ceiling, and we just coast along up here all the time. It's like someone's left the hose on.
Right.
You know? Very bad for our body. And when it comes to dysbiosis, that stress response alters our microbiome. It makes our microbiome hostile.
Hmm.
So that's something that you would know more about. But of course, when you make the microbiome hostile, things either reduce or grow more that shouldn't
Yeah.
be.
We say that all the time. And then even if you get out of your stress state, you're
Mm,
now left with this sort of like damaged microbiome that on its own can cause symptoms, but stress was a part of the story, and often it's not gone for good.
mm.
For
Yes.
sure.
Yep.
And then I find it so interesting because I find that people tend to be able to buy in on, like, let's say we get a SIBO breath test, and it's like, okay, there's clearly a bacteria in your small bowel. The story makes
Mhm.
sense. This bacteria gets a hold of fiber, FODMAPs, it makes gas. The gas is bloating you, it's causing your
Mhm.
diarrhea. We can
Yeah.
kill this bacteria. Like, that's an easy train to get on. But
Mhm.
I find that the stress story is a little bit tougher for people. Um,
Yes. Yes.
it's a little bit less direct, yeah, and I almost think it's a little bit challenging because 'cause we're kinda trapped in the world we're in. It's like, I don't know if you have kids, but I can't just, like, dump my kids off and, like, be done with them, or if I did, I'd go to jail, and I don't want to anyway, but it's
Yeah.
stressful, right, to, like,
Yeah.
have, and live in our world. We get on in social media, and, like, I was just actually watching a YouTube video, and the first it was a mom that was making it. She said she was talking about, like, a trad wife channel, and she's like, I don't like to watch this content because it makes me feel very stressed. And it's meant to be
Yes.
like a relaxing video of a woman cooking, but
Oh,
you feel challenged by it because you're comparing yourself. Like, well, I let my kids
yes.
eat cereal for breakfast, and this lady's over here, making everything from scratch. So, like,
Coaching eggs.
there's stress around every corner that you can't escape. So I think this story. I'm curious if you get this, but I get where it's like it happens a lot in, like, an encounter where they're like, "You want to give me antimicrobial herbs? Tell me where to buy it. Take my money gun. Like, take my credit card. Let's do it." But if it's like, "Hey, let's talk about stress or, like, past trauma may be a factor in this,"
Yep.
they're not interested in that conversation. Like, do you encounter
Mm.
that?
I've heard of that. Obviously, I mean, yes, practitioners that I work with, in your position, right, where
Mhm.
you're the one broaching this subject with your clients.
Yeah, maybe they're like, "You're just not qualified,"
Yeah, it's
which
more
is
that
true.
once they come to me, they're already on board, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're both getting a biased selection of, like, the people that want what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have heard of this, through the practitioners that I work alongside, that it's a delicate kind of subject,
Yeah.
to broach, with the client. Um, and yeah, it's interesting. I think what I've discovered is that there's a couple of things. One, it's how it less so how it's the confidence of the practitioner that delivers it, meaning
Mm,
if you are dead set that this is what I see, I'm noticing that this is happening in you, and this is definitely a factor that we need to attend to. Because the truth is, if you don't, all the work and the money and the
right.
effort and the protocols that they are doing with you,
Yep. It's gonna all come back.
that's
See you in
right.
6
Yeah,
months with it all back again. Yep.
that's right. And that's desperately sad.
Yeah.
Because it takes so much emotional energy, physical energy, finances, all of those things to
Yes.
move through those protocols. It's not
Absolutely.
just a breathe. It's not just, taking a B vitamin every day.
Oh,
It's
oh,
it's
absolutely. It does tend to work less well each time as well. So
Oh, there you go.
it
Yeah.
really is important to we're already doing something that's upstream compared to their traditional care, but you're more upstream and like you've got to go as upstream as you possibly can if you want to
Yeah.
hope of keeping it at bay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so if you have the ability to really deliver that, and help people understand that actually this is really important, then obviously they're going to have a better outcome for themselves. And that's what they want, right? They
Yeah,
want that good outcome.
right.
They don't want these symptoms anymore.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is difficult. I'm lucky that I don't have to be the one to do the convincing. You know, I'm just here for when they are convinced and they
Yeah,
arrive.
right.
But look, some people are not convinced, we know when they arrive to me,
Sure.
over the years. There's some clients that are tentative and they will tell me that. They're tentative about that. Um, and um, and it's only through having the experience, I suppose, through exploring that and understanding, what's connected and how it's affecting them, that some people are just ready and some people aren't. And that's okay. It's not a
Yeah,
problem.
right.
The people that are ready, then we're here for that.
Yeah.
And some people, the readiness is, I've been on this journey for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. I've been to every practitioner under the sun and nothing's helping me.
Yeah,
Okay, time to do something different.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
How often do you feel like and I don't mean you can give me an exact number, but like give me a guesstimate around like what of the people you work with, how much of them what percentage of them do you feel like it's probably just like the chronic ongoing stress of daily life versus people where it's also just early life trauma that's a big factor in their digestive problems.
Yeah, they go hand in hand mostly.
Yeah.
Because somebody who grew up in an environment that was not safe for them in whichever way, it means that their nervous system is already geared to be in a stress response.
Right.
So they have a really finely tuned nervous system that likes to sit in its stress response. And
Mhm.
so you fast forward 20, 30, 40, 50 years, into those people's lives, and it means that they tend to experience stress more so than people who grew up in a safe environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, whose nervous systems felt safe. And so there's a lot more resilience in those nervous systems. Um, so, when I'm working with clients, it's not that everybody has trauma. Definitely, there are people that, describe having fine childhoods and etc.
Yeah.
But they've found that there's just been circumstances. It might be that when they went to university, they found that the study was really stressful,
Mm.
or they had a relationship breakup or something, when they're a bit older, and that created a
Started.
stress. Yeah. And usually it's not that we can't cope with stress in our lives, right? It's
Mm.
actually when it's unresolved. So stress is okay, unresolved stress not.
Yeah.
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 So the unresolved bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so good. I describe it to them sort of as like most people I think can relate to like if you're riding a bike and you try to like change the gears of the bikes. Like I have an old bike; it's like 15 years old, and a lot of times the gear it won't change. Like you've got to kind of be in the right conditions for it. Like you can't be on a hill, and like you've got to do it the right way. Like nobody else can ride my bike; they don't know how to do it because they'll get stuck in the gear. And that's kind of how I
Yeah.
describe it. It's like it's not that the bike's incapable of changing gears, but
Mm.
um, for some changes, it's difficult and it really tends to stay in this setting. And
Yeah.
for them, it's a setting that is having these downstream effects, like you described. On like my understanding is like primarily through the vagus nerve and like the adrenal hormone pathways. It's slowing motility,
Mm.
contributing to dysbiosis, possibly changing the way the immune system reacts in the gut. And that's, I think, what you're talking about with how is it that you would develop a dysbiosis or like an
Mm.
imbalanced bacterial
Mm.
colony in your gut related to
Mm.
stress. Well, your immune system is constantly sort of curating that
Mm.
colony of
Mm.
bacteria, and if the by definition, cortisol will is an immune suppressant. It will decrease
Mm.
immune function in the
Yep.
everywhere, which the largest area of your immune system is in the gut. It's like 70%
Yeah.
of your
Mm.
immune cells. So if that whole 70% of your immune system in the gut is downregulated, you're not going to be able to well defend in the gut against the bad things that are trying to overgrow. And then kind of like what
Yep.
we're saying is now you do have dysbiosis that can be found on a test, but
Mm.
what you're just talking about is so valuable because it's like if you don't want to miss where that originally started.
Yes.
And it can, like you said, be chronic stress and early life stress, an acute stressor. Like
Mhm.
other times I've seen it have been like there was a loss of like a close family member. There was, it's a big common one, or a divorce is another one where it's like, yeah,
Yep.
after that I had my IBS start, and
Yes.
you can test for it on the lab, but and that feels like the
Yes.
end of the story. But I think it's just so few people realize that like that's not the whole story. It's what you're talking about.
Yep. That's right. And like if we just talk about that for a moment, whether it's stress, whether it's anxiety, whether it's trauma, what we think about up here in our mind activates a neurochemical response in the brain. So if we think about our favorite holiday, our favorite person, our favorite pet, we get these beautiful neurochemicals that get activated in the brain and that we feel in the body as an emotion. And we start feeling things like happiness and joy and love, and it's immediate, right? We can activate that straight away. We can have a neutral thought. I can look at the wall in front of me, nothing. Doesn't activate anything, it's just
Sure.
nothing. I can have it, you can think about something that is distressing, a really difficult time in life, something that was really hard, and that will also activate a neurochemical response that has a very different feeling to love and joy and happiness. It will be sadness and despair, um, anger, all kinds of things. And so, what we think about, we feel as an emotion because it's a biological response in the body. If we don't have some way to acknowledge, attend to, resolve, move through that emotion, especially if it's intense or painful,
Mhm.
it stays in the body. And then that's when the body starts getting affected. So we might have, like, if we have a really acute event, say someone does a public speaking event and they're afraid to public speak.
Mhm.
And so, they don't sleep the night before, they feel sick, they have diarrhea the next morning, they're feeling really unwell, their stomach's gripping like this, right? That's an acute event. But once that talk is over, it's fine, it's gone, no problem. Um, those are, tend to be okay. There's a resolution there because I don't have to do it again, right? Um, but if you then, have these happening in the body, especially if they're long term and there isn't a resolution, they just stay in the body.
Mm,
Um, and so talk therapy doesn't access the body. Talk therapy
mm,
only functions up here in
mm,
the mind. But now the symptoms have developed down in the body. So when people do have those big life events like a divorce or a death, they might have an acute response. They'll feel those symptoms immediately. But actually the flow on effect where it affects their dysbiosis may not be for 3, 6, 12 months.
yes.
Takes a
Yeah,
while.
it does.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the body's in a stress response for all that time. It's pumping adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine into the system the whole
Mhm.
time. For all that time, eventually, when that has an opportunity to die down, that's when things start to shift. The body's no longer in the acute state of stress, but that wears off, and then
Yeah.
those effects happen. So it does take time, and that's, I think, important. People don't know that readily. Like, it's on my intake form. My intake form, one of the questions is, what was happening in your life 3 to 12 months before the onset of symptoms. And it's amazing the information you get in there.
Yes.
Amazing.
It's
And
funny,
so
I asked the same question. It's so
yeah,
telling. Yeah.
yeah, so telling. But what we look for, when we don't know that is, well, no, that can't be the effect because that happened to me 6 months ago, but I've got this
Yeah.
now. We're looking for this immediate, like they're butting up against each other, right?
Like some kind of like scratch on your arm. It's like it happens, it's there.
Mm,
Instant.
yes,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
not quite like that.
yeah. But if we can see that actually, if it's been quite a severe stressor, and then we can see that symptoms have come after that, that can also help a lot because there's some cues there that say, okay, well, yes, I might go off and get some testing and help that dysbiosis to rebalance. But also, if I can honor in myself that I had a really stressful period in my life that needs some attention in me, that needs some healing, then you've got the right balance.
Yeah.
Because if you go and you do the protocols and you only do the protocols and you give all your attention there and all your focus there and all your emphasis there, and you don't give some emphasis to the other event that happened in your life that's still unresolved, it's devastating. We talked about it briefly before, touched on it, that another 6 months on or 12 months on when your symptoms return, what can happen is there's a real, people kick themselves. They say, it didn't work. There's something wrong with me. My body's this. My body's, doesn't work properly. Then there's this attacking your own body,
Yeah.
and wagging your finger at yourself and being really self-critical, or I mustn't have done enough, perfectionist. I mustn't have done enough. I didn't do it
Yeah.
right. I only took 3 of those a day rather than 4, and it's all my fault now.
Yeah, or like
And
a despairing loss of hope. Like I'm running out
yeah,
of things, ideas, like because I've rent one. There's one more thing that doesn't work, and I'm feeling
yep,
hopeless.
yes,
Yeah,
horrible feeling. That hopeless feeling, that is a real hallmark of the clients that I see.
yeah,
It's actually one of the questions also in my intake form. How do you
yeah,
feel about symptoms?
yeah,
Yeah, hopeless, helpless, distraught. Yeah, all of those
yeah.
things. But that hopeless, that is a horrible, and because, if a client, sees you and it's the first time they've ever seen anybody, then, there's more hope there, great. But of course,
Right.
that's not always the story. The story can be, I've been seeing some people for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and exactly what you described. It's just builds on this hopelessness of why isn't it working? And so that's my slice of the pie. When we're talking about gut disorders that can come from so many places, there's
Mhm.
so many causes, you have to look at all the slices of the pie. And
Yeah.
my slice is the emotional, behavioral, and psychological aspects. Actually, I did this one time, maybe in another talk, and I remember the practitioner that I was talking to said, "No, you've got that wrong. That is not your slice. This is your
Yeah.
slice."
Yes. Exactly. You got the
And
whole
that,
pie, girl.
yeah, it's like it's at least half. And
For sure.
and on that point, I think as a society, we underestimate the effect of stress on us because
Right.
we've normalized this level of stress.
I just had somebody in my office this week that said, I've got these horrible digestive problems, all these symptoms. It's so horrible. And like, introduced the topic of stress, and she's like, yeah, I have a ton of stress. Like, I'm in business, small children, super stressful, but obviously that can't really be contributing. So we've got to figure out what's really
Oh,
causing it. It was just like a complete steamroll of that topic. Like, there's no
yes.
way that could be doing it. No,
Oh,
I'm with you. Like, they just don't. I think it's like because the mechanisms of it are not well understood, it's
yes.
not, like, within our common, like, collective understanding that it's just hard for them to kinda make that connection, I think.
Very hard, yeah. And that's why it's so wonderful to have practitioners like yourself who understand that concept, who can build that education, as you're working with, client after client, year after year. That's part of the education, is talking about that so that we start to have a greater understanding and acknowledgement and therefore options,
Yeah.
for tending to those things.
Yeah. So
Mm.
tell me this. I mean, I've seen a ton of research on hypnotherapy for digestive
Mm.
symptoms, but I saw very clearly on your website that's not what you do. So I wrote down a
Yeah.
couple of things. So like you do embodied psychotherapy, gut directed imagery. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about your actual like. Tell me about your process.
Yeah, definitely. The reason I move away from yeah, I'll explain this. One of my studies was in hypnotherapy, clinical hypnotherapy.
Hmm.
Um, but I discovered very early on in the study, in studying it, becoming qualified, that it actually wasn't embodied enough.
Mm,
Actually takes things outside of people to see them and feel them, experience them outside of themselves.
hmm.
And that is precisely one of the problems, the main problem that people have that come to see me, which is they're disconnected from themselves. So
Okay.
disconnected from their emotions, disconnected from their thoughts, disconnected from their needs, disconnected from their body. And so very quickly, I started to adapt, how I was practicing and working with clients to bring them into more of an embodied state within themselves.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's where I ended up with the term, so gut-directed imagery, because it's actually factual. That's what it is. It's a guided imagery that moves through the digestive tract. It's gut-focused. So it's just an imagery that uses that. Embodied psychotherapy is exactly that. It's coming into the self. So when I said before, you can't use the mind anymore. You can't think anymore to get your way through physical symptoms in the body. You actually have to come down into the body and do the work there. So
Hmm.
if this is a person, we've got the mind up here, emotions and body. So these three main aspects. And those three main aspects are the places that I work, in embodied psychotherapy. We do some relaxation. We come down and really connect with the self and explore internally. What am I feeling? What's my body doing? What am I thinking? And how do all of those affect each other? Because they do.
Yes.
So, yeah, they do. So the hypnotherapy component is really I call gut directed imagery because it's a lovely guided imagery. There's no magic in it. It is literally just a process of relaxation, a deep
Hmm.
relaxation. When we relax, what we're essentially doing is in a guided imagery is focusing our mind on the imagery. The imagery is designed to keep a person quite engaged. Mine's set in a rainforest. There's sounds of birds and waterfalls and things like
Yeah.
that. And so it's designed to keep you engaged because what we're doing is moving you away from the stressful thinking that you used to doing. So we're slowing down, your mind on those stressful thoughts and bringing your mind to a place that's either pleasant or neutral. So by doing that, we start to relax the mind and the body begins to relax too.
Hmm.
The idea here is that we are trying to move you out of your sympathetic stress response and into your parasympathetic rest and digest response.
Yeah.
Yeah. So relaxation first, winding right down, mind, body. And then, of course, the imagery is gut directed. So it moves through the digestive tract.
So it's like I'm
Um,
imagining something in my stomach, or like I'm imagining something in my bowel, like that.
That's right. Yeah, it's actually you stand under the waterfall. That's mine. That's how I created it. And the waterfall, the water moves through the digestive tract piece by piece. But we're
Hmm.
not just, moving through, bacterias and things like that. It's actually It's a lot about feeling safe. It's
Mm,
about how soothing that is. Yeah,
so
it's about
interesting.
yeah, it's about, washing away fear and dread, all of those kinds of things. So it really helps bring a person into themselves and to relax. That relaxation is such an important piece because at the beginning of our conversation, we talked about, um, that my work is essentially coming back to the nervous system. That's all
Mhm.
it is. It's the nervous system. So what is activating the nervous system to be in a sympathetic stress response? That's what I'm interested in knowing, and that's what our work becomes. So what is it in that person's life? Is it
Yeah,
that work is terrible? Is it that there was a death in the family? Is it that a relationship ended? Is it that there's childhood trauma that's still affecting a person now in how they show up and engage in the world? What are the things that are causing your nervous system to be stressed? That's the topic of our work. And so part of that is then the homework. It's like, it's not enough to see me for an hour once a week. We have to actually start coaching the nervous system to be able to relax.
yeah,
And that's what gut directed imagery does. It allows the nervous system to relax. And it's no good to do that on its own. You know, I often say to clients, like I have an iPhone app with gut directed imagery in it, as well as other meditations and imageries and practices in there. Now, if that was enough, if someone could just buy a, $10 app and listen to it every night and they were completely, cured of their symptoms, great. You and I wouldn't even be having this conversation.
and you'd be a bazillionaire.
Exactly. Exactly. But that's not enough. It's not enough on its own. Yeah, it's one thing to help the nervous system relax in the moment, but you actually have to then do the work, the inner work, um, on the thing that is activating the nervous system in the first place so that you can make foundational changes so
Yeah,
that you don't continue to live in that same way to activate the nervous system. Mm.
okay, I see. So, tell me if I got this right. It sounds like it looked like on your website, maybe they, like you said, meet with you for maybe an hour per week for maybe 5 or 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and then it sounds like you're speaking to them during this hour to get them into that parasympathetic state, and then
Mm.
the homework, it looks like maybe it's like 30 minutes once a day, during the
Yeah.
week. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very similar to that, you're right. So in the appointments, yeah, once a week, we start with 6 appointments. It's
Mhm.
just, a realistic expectation, we can't
Yeah.
solve this in 4 appointments.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah,
so we
but
start
something
with
tangible of like, "Okay, I can do 6 weeks of this."
that's
Yeah.
right, yeah. If there's more time required, then there's more time, that's great, it's therapy at the end of the day, so I'm still a psychotherapist. It's just that people have come to me with a specific problem, and
Mhm.
we look underneath those symptoms to what the cause of them are. And so we can spend sometimes years and
Yeah.
years, working together. Um, and so, yeah, that work it's dynamic in the sense, there's counseling that happens in the session, but there's often a component of some embodied work, which is what you describe. So I
Mhm.
facilitate some relaxation, and then we kind of go inwards. And so it's an exploration of what am I feeling? How's this affecting me? What is affecting me in my life? What does this mean to me? What am I holding? What activation is it having in my body? And so by bringing that awareness and that exploration to that, it's amazing that without even doing anything about that in the first instance, it softens on its own. It's like any of us. When we're fully seen and heard, we go, "Oh,
Mhm.
wow, that feels so good." The
Yeah.
same applies within ourselves. When we see and hear ourselves and acknowledge what's there and validate what's there, we relax.
Yeah.
Then we begin to understand, oh, okay, that's why this is built into you. That's where it's come from. This is what it means to you. Okay, so how do we find a way through that, out of that, to the other side of that, or to get you what it is that you want or need? that is actually going to help you.
Yeah.
And so that's when we start to make foundational changes. So yeah, that's the work. And then of course, as you said, the gut directed imagery is the beginning of the homework.
Yeah.
And the starting point, is to begin that practice of relaxation at home.
It's fascinating.
Mm.
I'm gonna throw you a little left wing question here, but I can't not ask you this.
Go.
Do you have you heard about you can get like a device that stimulates the vagus nerve, like it's
Yes.
VNS or vagus nerve stimulating. There's like the gamma core, true vega, like are like the most
Yeah.
I don't know if they have them in Australia, but they're the
Mm.
American ones.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me what you think about that in terms of in the context of what we're talking about. Like if someone say does have chronic stress or past trauma and they're kind of stuck in the sympathetic nervous state, like how do you feel about the idea of them, okay, I get this device, I kind of
Mm.
zap my neck a couple times a day, like life is good. Like tell me tell me what you think.
Yeah. Well, what I know is that Band-Aids fall off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's okay to utilize, you know, a tool like that,
Mhm.
but you still have to do the work underneath. You
Yeah.
still have to ask yourself the question, why is my nervous system activated like that?
Right.
So if you're living a life that's full of stress and chaos and anxiety and trauma and all kinds of things, and then that's your waking hours for 16 hours a day, but then you come and lay down for half an hour, even to do my gut directed imagery, right? Or any meditation. If you do that for half an hour, but don't change any of those other 16 hours, it's a losing battle.
Yeah. It's
It's
perfect
not sustainable.
articulation of that. Yeah.
It's not sustainable. And
Yeah.
it's the safer place to be. Look, safety is what all my clients want. It's actually what we all want in the world. We want to feel safe. People that experience heightened anxiety do not feel safe. It's fear. That's what anxiety is. And using tools is helpful, but we know in our psyche, we know when we are relying on something that is not permanent. We know when there's still this background going on of our own fears and anxieties that we are placating with something.
Mm.
We know it. And so the safest place to be, to get to, is actually to attend to the fears, to find a way to actually feel safe. Then you don't need to rely on things. Then you don't need to placate. And that's the best place. We all want to move through the world feeling really solid and grounded and steady and safe in ourselves. That's the goal.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you're like in a house with a tiger, um, if you do something to like, if you like hide from the tiger, then maybe for a minute you feel better, but you still know the tiger's in the house, and
Mhm.
that's a band aid, like you said.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes because I don't have the authority to say like certainly, it's not within my scope to say that someone has the need for psychotherapy. So for me, sometimes
Mm.
a tool like that can be a little bit diagnostic. Like, okay, let's
Mm.
see if stimulating your vagus nerve does make you feel different. And if it does,
Mm.
we're really on to something. But I think it's so important to not, like you said, stop there. That's only learning more that this is real for you. And
Yeah.
it's never going to be a long term, permanent resolution like the work that
Yeah.
you do with people. So,
Yeah, that's right. And
yeah.
I love I love your analogies around the tiger, especially that one in the house. You can close the door, but then what? You're just stuck in the room. You
Right.
can't go out and do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. It's
That's a
gonna find
horrible
you under the bed soon.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that.
So, oh my gosh, I feel like I could pepper you all day. At some point, you'd have to invoice me because so fascinated by what you do. But I'm sure other people are fascinated as well. Can you tell people like how they can learn more about this? I know you have an
Mm.
amazing podcasts that people can check out, and then you have a website that's wonderful, and then maybe you can share a little bit about your app as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, sorry, my voice.
Yeah.
I think the best place to learn more about and get a sense of what we're talking about here is the podcast,
Okay.
because I try and keep all my podcasts under 20 minutes because we are all time deprived. And so people want snippets, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that you know they can go on there and they you find a topic, you know, that it really stands out to your head and you think, oh yes, and listen to that one, you know, because the feedback that I get from the podcast is, wow, I felt like you were speaking directly to me,
Yeah.
because it resonates. You know, this is exactly what my experience is.
Because what you're talking about is the real fundamental thing, and
That's
nobody else
right.
talks about it. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. 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 And so the podcast, which is called Happy Inside, it can be found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's a really great place to start, you know, and it's a really great place to get some tips straight away, you know, if people want that too. But just to really hear about yourself,
Mhm.
you know, in all the episodes. And then, of course, yeah, the website. The website is happyinside.com.au. And so it has access to all of those things on there. And the iPhone app, you know, that we mentioned just now, yeah, it's only an iPhone app. I apologize to anybody who does not have an iPhone.
That's okay.
Um, but yeah, it's a tool that can be really helpful. The gut-directed imagery is in that app, as well as other tools to use, other imageries, other practices, meditations, etc. So it's just nice, you know, it's such an app-dominant world, so it's nice to have something at your fingertips that you can just plug in and use at any time. It can feel a bit supportive, you know, as you need to move through some things or find a way to, you know, just bring some relaxation or calm, you know, into your moments. Even people use it during the day sometimes, you know, when they're at work, just to help recenter themselves. Yeah, so all of those, you know, are there and available for people, you know, to really get a sense of what we've been talking about today, and to see if it resonates with them in some way. And if it does, of course, then that's why I'm here, is to then do the individual work, which is so unique, you know, to the person, so that we can move through the other side of, you know, the stressors, the anxiety, the desperation, the frustration, the symptoms, and also to make the work that they're doing with you faster, more
Yeah.
permanent,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, easier. Because that's actually a bit of what I do as well, because I see clients that most of them are doing some kind of protocol.
Yeah.
And you might, you know, notice this in your clinic, that sometimes the protocols are stressful.
Oh,
Just
absolutely. They're stressful.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's part of our work too, is to figure out how can we support you best through those protocols, you know, to stay on track, you know, with the practitioner and work well in that way so that they have the most success, you know.
Absolutely. You're such an asset. I wish that there was one of you in every town, which would never happen. I know you're one of a kind, but what you do is so needed and so essential. So I hope that people can connect with. I'm going to download your app for sure, like tonight, and get a little bit of waterfall gut going. I can't wait. Um,
Good.
and I hope other people connect with that and or listen to your podcast and connect with you as well. And just even if they don't work with you, honestly, I think that just this conversation needs to happen in the sense that what you said, like people finally feel heard when they hear this message because this is what's been going on all along, and they've been
Yeah.
kind of gaslit. I don't even know if it's gaslighting because I feel like gaslighting is like you know the truth, but you're not sharing it. I think it's just
Mm.
genuinely within healthcare that that this truth isn't like well known.
Yes, I
But in
agree with
any
you.
sense, they're just not getting validated and they're not getting long term solutions. So thank you for sharing. And would love to have you back anytime. Please just let me know, and I would pepper you with 1,000 more questions, Michelle.
I am very happy to answer as many questions as you need. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and take care.